Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War news update for the 17th of June 2023. Apologies, I'm a little bit later than I normally am, but life has gotten away. Right, what has happened? Let's go to the General Staff, Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, and there has been a definite uptick across all of the categories. Fighting is hard, and it's taking its toll on the Russians, as we can see, but probably on the Ukrainians as well. I know that there are, it is, the front lines are becoming maybe a little bit more positional in the areas that they've been attacking in the south. So 670 liquidated personnel, 12 tanks, 23 APVs, armored personnel vehicles. That's going to be IFVs, APCs, and MRAPs, so on and so forth. Although I don't know that the Russians have that many MRAPs on show anymore. Artillery systems, 22 and 3 multiple launch rocket systems. So again, that explicit targeting of those artillery pieces is continuing. They are a thorn in the Ukrainian side down on the front line, particularly in Zaporizhia and southern Donetsk areas, as well as minefields. I mean, goodness, I think part of the problem is you just can't move for mines. One helicopter has been taken out, and I'll talk a little bit about helicopters. The UK Ministry of Defence or UK Intelligence Update was quite revealing today. 7 drones, 12 cruise missiles, that would be from the night before. 38, actually, there was yesterday morning, there was a cruise missile and Kinjal hypersonic missile attack on Kiev during the time that the South African delegation turned up. 38 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is a massive number, and one piece of special equipment. So you can see that it is really attritional for the Russians, although they are doing a fairly good job of defending territorially speaking. The question is, at what cost? So is this, like we saw with Bakhmut, a case of the ratios being bad for the Russians, but they are having an effect in Bakhmut? It was slowly advancing. In here, it is meaning that the Ukrainians are only slowly advancing. But yeah, so the question is, does that still work in Ukraine's favors because they're exhausting the Russian reserves? This is what people are talking about. Okay, talking about losses. I was going to talk about this yesterday in my extra. I just ran out of time. So I've told you before that BBC Russia and who is it? It's not Medusa. It might be Media Zona. Are doing this project where they are counting up Russia's dead in the same way that Oryx have kind of visual confirmation of material losses in terms of damage, destroyed, captured. Here we have, if you like, visually confirmed losses of humans, as according to social media, internet, mainstream media sources, so on and so forth. So they are counting up people at where the death certificates have been shown on social media, or things have been announced and the deaths have been definitely as a result of the war. So even if you've got someone, yeah, pretty sure has died in the war, their funeral's been announced, but it hasn't been explicitly mentioned that they were killed in the war, then they kind of don't add them. So this is a real bare bones minimum, and they've now got up to 25,000 Russian dead. So that is, it will be several times bigger than that for sure. But that's your absolute minimal Russian losses, and you work up from there. Okay, moving on. Yesterday, Putin, and I reported on this, and I was quite derogatory about it, and I still am. I mean, Putin's plucking numbers out of his posterior. He's saying Ukraine has already lost 186 tanks and 418 armored vehicles during the counteroffensive, which is absolutely fanciful. So when you go back to this, and you've got, there's so much video evidence coming out to support this. I could show you reams and reams of first-person view drone footage that's coming out every single day. Just so much, I just can't show it to you. I don't have time, but at least I can defend these trends for sure. Whereas your man Putin has nothing. And then he announces that they've destroyed 5 Patriot complexes. They don't even have, they've got 2 whole complexes, 2 whole batteries, and maybe a few other launchers to be thrown in. They are hopefully getting more. They have 5 announced by Raytheon that will be sometime by or in early 2024. And there's talk about getting extra stuff to the Ukrainians, but A, they don't have that many. B, you can't destroy 5 whole complexes unless you are sending like 10 pinpoint accurate Kinzhal hypersonic missiles to those 10 different places of the battery, and all of those missiles get through, or a tactical nuke. Right, these are set up over like a kilometer radius, maybe even more. You can set parts of the battery 30 kilometers away, so you can't destroy a battery of Patriots, a Patriot battery. You can't do it unless you like. I don't know. Just I won't go on. It's just ridiculous. So if you believe the Russians, and here you have Mr. Number One Russian, then you are incredibly gullible. And you may criticize me for taking the general staff figures and taking them somewhat seriously, and I look mainly at the trends here rather than the top line figures or the whatever. But the if you take the Russian figures even remotely serious, then you need to go and see a doctor, I think. So yesterday, 6 Kinzhals was sent, 6 cruise missiles. They were shot down. That appears to be against Kyiv, and it appears to be 100% success rate. I think Kyiv, because of the Patriot systems that haven't been destroyed, because of those, they are able to shoot these down. But then, of course, they fall down and cause damage anyway. But obviously, not their full explosive capacity is kind of used there. Right. This is what the UK intelligence update said that's a little bit worrying. Since the start of the Ukrainian counteroffensive operations in southern Ukraine, Russia has reinforced its attack helicopter force in the region. Imagery shows that over 20 extra Russian helicopters deployed to Berdyansk airport, approximately 100 kilometers behind the front line. This I've shown you. You've got to be thinking that Ukrainians would be hammering that airport with all sorts of missile, but I don't know, maybe not. In the constant contest between aviation measures and countermeasures, it's likely that Russia has gained a temporary advantage in southern Ukraine, especially with attack helicopters employing longer range missiles against ground targets. Now, some people are saying that Russia have the advantage in southern Ukraine. That's not what this says. This says that they have a temporary advantage in southern Ukraine between aviation measures and countermeasures. In other words, just in the air sphere, if you like, the Russians have a bit of an advantage in southern Ukraine, and that's absolutely true. They have the air advantage, I'd say, all across that front line, and they're using helicopters quite widely at the moment to eke out that advantage and to cause the Ukrainians some losses. We've seen some footage of Ukrainian units being taken out effectively by ATGMs launched from these Ka-52s. That has also meant that the Russians are using more Ka-52s in a riskier way closer to the front line, and we have seen I think 3 helicopters lost in the last week. Another one lost yesterday. So that is that's a collateral of doing that kind of activity. Yes, they have an advantage, but also they will lose more of these airframes. Yeah, I'm just showing you. This is the only bit of footage I'm going to show you in my hits and losses today, and it's basically a mine layer being taken out by first-person view drones with munitions on board. Let's just see. I just want to show, and I'm showing you this because of the vehicle it is. I mean, it's a Kamaz truck, as far as I can work out, with these barrels that fire out mines either side. And it looks like it's only damage here, but I've seen further footage to it's basically it blew up. Oh, it didn't blow up, it kind of smoldered. It is out of action. I saw a blackened husk of it later. So that only looks like it's damaged, but it is taken out. And here is what it is. The UMZ is a system of remote mining of both anti-tank and anti-personnel mines. For example, it can mine territory with 180 PTM3 anti-tank mines on a distance of 55 to 120 meters. I think mines, and I said this before the offensive started, I think mines and minefields are one of the biggest issues for the Ukrainians. You cannot advance quickly. You just can't. Everything will be super slow. like just one of these mines is the end of a vehicle potentially. And when you've got hundreds and hundreds of mines everywhere, thousands of mines everywhere, I mean, goodness me, it's going to be a problem for the Russians. Imagine the war stopped and Ukraine went, yeah, sorry about that. Okay, we're not sorry about that. You know, you can have the annexed territories. The Russians would then be left with huge amounts of area just absolutely covered in mines. Wouldn't be usable at all. So whatever the end result is of this conflict, clearing up mines is going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward. There's been advances in the Vuhledar area for the Ukrainians, but there are mines everywhere as well, and so everything becomes slow. So you've got to bear that in mind. Right. On the outskirts of Moscow, there's a strong fire near the CHP 22 power station. I mean, that's a big fire by a big old power station. Then we've got fires threatened a thermal power plant in Dzerzhinsky. This looks like a different power plant. There's no red uh, chimneys there, so the blaze turned out to be at a construction base next to the power station in Nizhny Novgorod region. So another big fire. And then we had this large-scale fire, not last night, but the night before. But footage came out after my news piece, video from local social networks. I think this was, ironically, the emergency services building, or something to do with that was a significant fire on top of that. I have no idea what from, whether it was a drone that was shot down, whether it was a drone that was intended to go there, or whether it was some other incident. I'm not sure, but you can imagine that might have been a bit of a problem for that whole building. I don't know what the end result is, but it's going to be fairly difficult to put that out from below without it or doing a much more much more damage. You will be seeing more Ukrainian power grid attacks in Russia and Russian-occupied Ukraine in the coming weeks, says Trentelenko. Electric power to Russian railway logistics in Russia's Russian armed forces' Achilles heel, and Ukraine has both the long-range drones and Patriots to stab that heel. Patriots, I presume it means partisans there rather than Patriot missiles. So the lack of electricity in two places in Crimea yesterday, that's as a result of either Ukrainian activity or pro-Ukrainian activity, Ukrainian activity from behind enemy lines. That is going to be a challenge for the Russians going forward for sure. There is a fire at the Karlovsky military airbase in the Moscow region. Don't have any more information on that, but that came out last night. So there's been sort of quite a lot of issues around and about. And this was, again, if we're talking about Russian figures, so TASS, which is the Russian, basically, MOD arm, is state media. So they have put out a video talking about this NTLB, I think it was, being stacked with charges, explosives. We've seen this before. Video has it, being sent against the Ukrainian lines. Of course, you don't see anything else other than that. So well done for doing that. But then within that report, they talk about Bradley being destroyed, and then they show a YPR, which is like an M113, an old APC, and say this is a Bradley blown up. And of course, it's just full of claptrap, aren't they? So you just got to be careful of everything they say. Right, let's move on to odds and sods. Here's some video footage of the Novikhovka Dam. So this used to be full of water. It's just some more footage to show the vast, area of land that is now on show. You could think that could be a sensible place to then attack from, but as I said yesterday, it's super open. The ground might not be firm at all. You could get bogged down and hit. I mean, you could do light attacks across there, maybe some nighttime attacks or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, don't think that suddenly opens up another front that easily. Okay, let's go on to this. So the focus of the war is shifting south towards Mariupol, says the Ukrainian defense minister. And this is, some of this I've already reported to you. Oh, by the way, I did, I think on my live thread the other night, I said, so here it says the UK's donated 14 Challenger 2 tanks. I said, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. There are 22 over there. Other people said no, they sent 28. No, the 28 figure came from what happened. We said we would send 14 Challenger 2 tanks. The Ukrainians did that clever thing where they said, "Oh, thanks for sending 28 Challenger 2 tanks," without the UK having said anything. And then the UK went, "What? You what? We said we're going to send 28." That was the Ukrainians saying that. There was not any official announcement. So the official figure is still 14. I I have it on, some good information that we've actually sent 22. Uh, so the 28 is what the Ukrainians said straight after this initial announcement. So don't take that as a number that is actually out there. Uh, but anyway, so the point here is that the shift of attack could be moving away from maybe the westernmost Melitopol kind of area, more towards Mariupol from Vuhledar and down. So let's go now and look at the front line. It at the information I have there, and there's not a great amount of information coming out. Defense Ministry: Ukraine has advanced 2 kilometers in multiple directions. Fairly vague. Ukraine's forces have advanced up to 2 kilometers in multiple directions, but face heavy resistance. So there is this admission that things are slow and things are difficult. UK Ministry of Defense: Russia likely gained temporary advantage in Ukraine's south with attack helicopters. And this is what I was telling you about. That's not what it said. I mean, it said that, but the temporary advantage in the Ukraine south is in the air. It's not temporary advantage overall. It's not like that. I read that and it's like, oh, Ukrainians are losing ground because the Russians have advantage in the whole battlefield due to their attack helicopters. But it didn't say that. So Russian attack helicopters employing long-range missiles against ground targets have likely given Russia a temporary advantage. Again, is that's a misrepresentation of what they actually said. So I just need to confirm this. I know I've already gone through this, but it's really important to make sure that I'm right here. In the constant contest between aviation measures and countermeasures, it is likely that Russia has gained a temporary advantage in southern Ukraine. In the constant contest between aviation measures and countermeasures, that's quite a nuanced statement there, right? And the way that sentence is constructed, maybe if English is not your first language or you're just being really hasty, you just take this out. They've gained temporary advantage, and that would be incorrect. So just be wary, uh, everyone in the world, with language. Okay. Russian channels about today's battles. So it's reported from Ukraine's video was about this little village here, Pyatikati, or something, has become a field of serious battles today with both infantry and tanks near Orikhiv. Roberterne remains the direction of the main blow. The enemy regrouped, fortified in the grey zone, pulled up mortars. Western technology is equipped with night vision devices. That's from the Russian channels. And the Russians are also reporting that active fighting is in that Pyatikatski area. Wargonzo reports that Ukrainians have advanced towards there, and there is a battle on the western outskirts of the village. I'd say it's all now quite a grey zone there. Rebar reports that Ukrainian forces managed to advance in the area between Novodonetsk and Uruzhaini, so that's near Velika Novosilka. I'll show you this all on my frontline update. Fighting is occurring on the outskirts of Uruzhaini, coming from two directions, the flank that Rebar is talking about and the road from Blahodatne along the river. So these are these two towns. You got what's it? It's Staromayorska and Uruzhaini. So it's still happening there, and Rivnopil is securely in the grey zone. A lot of pressure on that as well. So there are advances, but they're not, widespread. And then if you go further west, you come to Vuhledar and Pavlivka, where apparently there's been some advances, some saying to the west of Pavlivka, but there is no really great detail on where the advances are there. As we come back further, this is what this particular source says, Max 23, that there are movements, there are some consolidation of ground gained by the Ukrainians around the Velika Novosilka, and then again around Lukove, moving towards this village that has lots of K's and T's and Y's in. That's fairly nearby to there. Okay, Russian sources are claiming that Ukrainian forces have begun to deploy a significant number of electronic warfare systems along the front line in the Donetsk region, resulting in huge drone losses by Russian units. So this is coming from Russians, and leading many to believe that Ukrainian operation in the region is imminent. So you put that together with going towards Mariupol, and this is Donetsk region, which could be Vuhledar, it could also be Velika Novosilka. So it could be that they're going to shift away from the Zaporizhia region over to this. This could be a precursor, getting loads of drone losses and then moving in. Kenneth Gregg has quite a lot to say. Anything that's of particular interest. Talking about commandos being active around Novikakhovka. They might not still be there, but helps to fix Russian forces in those areas. Our media writes about attacks on Berdyansk and Mariupol, but it shouldn't be interpreted as that is towards those areas, of course. And then activity around Bakhmut. Russia have sent in a lot of reinforcements of building up defenses around Yahidne and Klishchivka, that's north and south of Bakhmut. Most of the reinforcements are Shoigu's Storm Z, which are convict cannon fodder, as he says here. He says Marinka is turning into the new meat grinder. He says that the Ukrainians are taking heavy losses in Marinka, but the Russians are taking huge losses. So that looks very much like what's happened previously in Bakhmut. And in Vuhledar, we have small successes west of Pavlivka. Remember that our and their minefields are huge here. Neither side can make a full attack without being hit by mines. So on and so forth. I think that is just a massive challenge for the Ukrainians. Okay, going on to military aid. Still lots to be said on this subject as well today, even though Ramstein was yesterday, there's stuff trickling out. Ukraine will not be able to get F-16 any earlier than 2024, says the Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov. And this is because he says, pilots will be fine, they'll be trained within 4 months, that's okay. But actually, it's all the rest of the stuff. Training of engineers, technicians, maintenance, gunsmiths, refuelers, etc., will last longer, as well as arranging the infrastructure. Whether that is managing expectations, under promise, over deliver. So yeah, we can't get it before 2024, and then it turns out that by the end of autumn they're using F-16s. I don't know, or that is genuinely the case. At the same time, this came out yesterday. Sweden signed a deal with Ukraine today on the training of Ukrainian pilots on Swedish JAS-39 Gripen fighter jets. This is part of a larger package they are sorting out, worth $23.5 million. The package will include Ukrainian pilots being trained on these. Now, that's brilliant. Obviously, you're not going to train pilots on Gripen if they're never going to fly Gripen. So the intention here is that Ukrainian pilots are going to fly Gripen, which means that they are going to be given Gripen, or they're going to get their hands on, or they're going to buy, or whatever. Gripen are going to end up in Ukraine being flown by Ukrainians. The question is when. Is this a long-term thing where they're going to have Gripen after the war ends type thing, or is this going to be for the war? Someone like Justin Bronk for the Royal United Services Institute, UK military think tank, has said this is too little too late, and it's more likely going to be a long-term thing. But I don't know. All I can say is, yeah, good. More the merrier. More airframes and training and capacity for the Ukrainians in the air is great. It gives them greater capability. These can fire some seriously useful NATO munitions, and they are decent planes. The question is, are there enough of them in circulation? And for the ramification of that calculation is there enough of a logistics train behind that can be put in place quickly and has enough spare parts and bits and pieces to allow this to be used as an effective weapon against the Russians. Okay. Sweden is also, as I say, has this military package within which is 60 military personnel being sent to the countries close to Ukraine to assist with the munition supply and spare parts for Swedish systems, including the STR V122, the STRF 9040, the Archer, and the RBS 70. So there's a bunch of stuff that they're getting. That's the CV, the infantry fighting vehicles are 9040. Their Archer is a really good self-propelled howitzer that has, I think, one of the highest firing rates. So Sweden have given a bunch of stuff, but obviously you need all the as we talked about with the airframes there, all the bits and pieces around it to allow this stuff to be used, to be repaired quickly, so on and so forth. So that's really good news. Leopards from Lisbon, so Portugal, excellent. Stepping up here with some stuff. 14 M113 armored personnel carriers, as the old ones, but 9 105mm howitzers as well. Useful, thank you, Portugal. And also, a drone manufacturer Takeva has confirmed that it will provide some of its long endurance systems to Kyiv to support land and maritime operations, a move bankrolled by the UK's International Fund for Ukraine. So the UK really is coming up with the goods continually throughout this war, and quite often you might get nations that go, yeah, we're giving this, but actually it's being bankrolled by nations like the UK. Netherlands is another one. They don't have a lot of kit. I saw a bit of an argument going on yesterday. Oryx is Dutch, right? And he's talked a lot about how bad Belgium have been in providing meaningful weapons and assistance to Ukraine. And then some people were fighting back at him, pushing back at him, saying, actually, Belgium doesn't have that much stuff. And he's like, it doesn't matter. He's like, Netherlands don't have much stuff. We don't have any tanks, and we've given 85 tanks. So, you don't need the stuff to give the stuff. And he made a point that Belgium decided to spend $100 million to make sure that one of the next astronauts up in the space station is Belgian. He's like, really, $100 million? Could that be better spent? So there's a bit of a wrangle going on there. Nonetheless, Belgium will hand over. I mean, this is what kind of started off the argument. Will hand over the 15th package of military aid to Ukraine, which sounds impressive, but actually has not been a huge amount in those packages, which will include M113 armored personnel carriers. The Ministry of Defence of Belgium reports, and again, these are really old bits of kit. They're obviously useful. Ukraine has been given a lot of them by a lot of nations, and thank you, Belgium. But to go back to what Oryx says, and they've got quite a good military industrial complex. Belgium, they like manufacturers. They have a number of manufacturers, so they have the ability to help out, I think, a little more than they are. But I know, if you're Belgium, let me know what you think. The USA provides Ukraine with an additional $205 million in humanitarian aid, and that was stated that's a statement from the US State Department. That's going to be helping in terms of food, drinking water, protection services, education, livelihoods, legal aid, affordable housing, healthcare, and much more. And then a bill has been submitted to the US Congress, providing for the allocation of $80 million for the purchase and transfer of ATACMS long-range missiles to Ukraine. Paul Massaro, senior advisor to the Helsinki Commission under the US Congress, announced this on Twitter. So this is great. Obviously, it needs to get through, and how likely is that? I don't know. But there are people in US Congress who have ATACMS still at front and center of their kind of vision of what the US needs to do to support Ukraine. Okay, Turkish have given 12.7 mil Canik M2 QCBH MG. There's not enough letters in some of these weapons. Dual mounts, and they've been delivered for use against loitering munitions. So these look like, to me, mini rocket launchers that can just fire off rockets at drones that are operating all across the skies at the moment. Ukraine is to work with Czechia, Slovakia on the purchase of CV90 armored vehicles. I talked about them already. Those are the Swedish, really good infantry fighting vehicles. Defense ministers of Ukraine, Czechia, and Slovakia signed a cooperation agreement on the purchase and maintenance of the Swedish vehicles, says Reznikov. And what else do we have? Slovenia will transfer material assistance to Ukraine to eliminate the consequences of the explosion of Kakhovka hydroelectric power station by the Russians. This is stated on the website of the Slovenian government. It's known that the estimated cost of assistance, including transportation, is €228,405. I always find that interesting that those €5 are particularly important. Apparently, I'm only including this because I had an argument with someone. So I said, right when it was announced that Russia are taking out a load of T-55s, T-54 tanks, really old tanks out of the storage, and just buffing them up and sending them to the front line. And I said one of the ways that they could be used would be for indirect fire as basically artillery. And someone who might have been some kind of expert in military, like, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. You're an absolute goon. They're never going to be used for that. They can't be used for that." I was like, but they can. And then I did a bit of a rebuttal on that, saying, well, here's loads of imagery of the Americans in the Korean War using tanks as artillery, and they put them up on these revetments, on these mounds, and allowed them to get higher elevation of their barrels and then fire, use indirect fire as howitzers, basically. And then I said, and T-55 tanks have been used in Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict only in 2018 as artillery in exactly this way. So I was like, these tanks that we're talking about that Russia are going to send, and some experts were saying they are going to be used in this way, have been used in this way in a conflict only sort of 5 years ago. And anyway, it turns out that they are being used in that way. So I just thought I'd add on to that. Apparently, the claimed T-54 was a T-62. Nevertheless, pretty sure T-54 will enter soon. Russians report it's been used by them as artillery in western Zaporizhia. So there you go. Whether that's T-62s or T-54s or T-55, whatever. The point is that they are using these in as indirect fire, actually as artillery, it appears. Right, Sergei Shoigu has visited Ostrammash for an inspection. So this is a military equipment manufacturing plant. The video shows a new batch of T-80 BVM OBR 2022 tanks. So these are like older type tanks, but updated in a 2022 way, including one with a Nakidka coat and a roof screen, and BTR-70, 2S4, 2S5, D30, 2B8, 2B9, and other equipment in storage. Some of these are really old, right? So I was looking at this footage and thinking, oh my goodness, this is a lot of footage. Shoigu is kind of getting to look around. Is this a case that actually Russia are manufacturing loads of stuff? Here we've got a sort of newish tank with this thermal coating on. That would be really useful, and a coke cage on the top. But the question is, how many are they producing? Yeah, look at all these workers working, but actually, in reality, this is all staged. How many of these? Someone's noting that there was no mechanism in the factory to move the vehicles around. What you'd expect is, in a real properly working factory, is once these things have been like finished, they'll be moved. But it's probably these things have been in place for months and months and months, and the moving thing that moves them around is not there, because they don't need to move anything around, because actually they're not really making anything. I don't know whether that's true. You've got a bunch of tanks on a railway track here. Again, the question is, how often is that moving, etc., etc. And you think you get worried. You think, this is a lot of kit that could go to the Russian forces, and you're just wondering actually how much of this kit goes out regularly. And then you look at all these vehicles, and you're thinking, goodness me, that's a lot of stuff. And then you're like, oh, this is really old stuff. And you go, Shoigu doing a bit of mechanics. And we've seen a similar one to this back in May. And again, these are old bits of equipment. Some of this, some of those howitzers are, they're not new. So I don't know. For God's sake, I don't know what to make of some of this. Well done. You've got those. Yeah. So that is that. The Russians might have a load of equipment to throw into the front line, or that could just be for show. And actually, most of it is really old equipment, like some of those howitzers you saw at the end there. Right, going on to geopolitics in Kyiv, Cyril Ramaphosa, so he's the South African leader, visited yesterday. This was pretty controversial, actually. First of all, they were held up in Poland, and there were claims from the South Africans that the Polish were being racist, so on and so forth. It didn't go down well in South Africa. They were held up, and they were like looking to have weapons confiscated. The South African security teams on the Polish airport. Blah blah blah. That then got sorted out. Then they got to Kyiv. Then there was this air raid that. There were Kinzhals and cruise missiles that were shot down. Then there was some kind of claims that they didn't hear anything. I don't really know. It was all like a bit. I don't know. I don't know if it worked out as well for the Ukrainians as one might have hoped. So after Kiev, they then visited St. Petersburg. So it was like go to Ukrainians, go to the Russians, try and sort out some peace deal. But the kind of the rhetoric around it seemed to be somewhat more pro-Russian. So in Kiev, Ramaphosa calls for peace, diplomacy, and fertilizer, while confirming South Africa would defy an ICC arrest warrant for the Russian president. Zelensky says Ukraine doesn't need more frozen conflicts. Then, as Shashank Joshi here says, imagine visiting Kiev and having the gumption to say this: there are offensives on both sides; they must be de-escalated. It's kind of like both sidesism, like blaming Ukraine, even if only implicitly. Just yeah, so I don't think this has been met with an awful lot of positivity from pro-Ukrainian voices, myself included. It'd be interesting to see what some South Africans say about how it's being reported in South Africa. Not necessarily about what Europe. I know there's some South Africans on my threads who are like completely against the position of the South African government and will happily like slag them off and whatnot. But I'm interested. I'm more interested. So I get that, and yeah, all good and well and blah blah blah. But I'm interested in how it's being received by the general public in South Africa, where the South African public opinion sits, and whether there is a narrative in the media that is pro-Russian, even if only kind of implicitly or insidiously. I'd be interested from the Ukrainians in my South Africans in my thread on your opinions there. Russia, quote, Russia is ready for peace talks with Ukraine on realistic terms, but today there are no prerequisites for this, Federation Council Speaker Valentina Matvienko said. Withdraw all of your forces in Ukraine, including Crimea, and if you're lucky, Ukraine might talk with you. Anders Nielsen has just done a video, I think, come out today that talks about how there can be no peace with Putin still in charge. You just can't do it. Like, even if the counteroffensive fails, right? Russians still need to be out of Ukraine as far as Ukraine are concerned. You know, there's just no peace when Putin still has kind of maximalist intentions underneath it all. It's basically practically impossible, and that is quite a barrier towards resolving this conflict. If you know, if it can't be resolved, if one out of the two people like leading the nations, you know, cannot be in place for that success to be I don't know what the word is because I've lost my words. Anyway, you get my point. That's the beauty of MS and a Saturday morning. The boycott of Mondelez International is growing. So this is the parent company that owns a load of brands like Cadbury, Toblerone, Oreo. Particularly in Scandinavia, as a snack company refuses to close its branches in Russia. The producer of brands such as Oreo, Cadbury, Toblerone, and Philadelphia cheese helps aggressor Russia pay for its war against Ukraine with its tax dollars. So yeah, go for it. I would suggest boycotting Mondelez and telling them this publicly on Twitter, by email. Just let them know that you ain't going to be buying their stuff anymore because they suck or something. Putin, in that same speech where he's talking about how they've destroyed half of Ukraine's army in like a week or so, says that Zelensky is not Jewish. Russian dictator Putin proclaimed that, quote, according to his Jewish friends, Ukraine's President Zelensky is not Jewish and a shame to the Jewish people, Russian media reported on June the 16th. So, yeah, okay, fair enough. And Estonia is to draft a law to use Russian assets for Ukraine's reconstruction. We've seen this with regard to the US trying to get that happening as well, and a number of different countries. Draft legislation for using the frozen assets of individuals linked to Russia's aggression to rebuild Ukraine, and that's of course a great idea. The challenge is, and I think, who is it that was saying something? Was it someone yesterday? Was it the Federal Bank in the US? Was it the IMF? I don't know. Someone was saying that actually this we need to be careful about this. It could be a bit tricky. uh, which is kind of the UK's position. UK's position is we've got a bunch of frozen stuff, but we don't really know what to do with it because if we liquidate it, turn it into kind of liquid cash and give that to Ukraine, there's all sorts of legal. We're opening ourselves up to legal ramifications, and that would not be ideal. So I don't know. There are differing positions on this across the spectrum. Right, there you go. Thank you for listening to this news update. Sorry, I struggle with my words sometimes. Please like, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate all of your support. You're all amazing. Yesterday, I had my last video was restricted, given an age restriction of over 18. I think the trolls are out and they're trying to have it in for me. That actually really does affect. So something like 5 out of my last 7 videos have had restricted adverts, which really affects, what I'm doing here in terms of this whole project. And that's just annoying because YouTube that I then appeal, and then most of the time they rescind the decision, but then no one's watching it. These are time sensitive videos, right? So no one's going to watch a news video from 4 days ago. So what they do is they restrict the adverts. Everyone watches it with restricted adverts, and then they say, "Oh yeah, sorry about that." 2 days later, they go, "Oh, sorry about that. You can have adverts on it," and now no one watches it. That's although no adverts for you guys is obviously really, really positive for your watching experience. Anyway, that's just a whinge from me. But YouTube just sometimes sucks a bit. Thank you. Take care. Speak soon.